Good. So we now come to the question of how do we use such tree models in computer vision? And I have a few examples from you. The first one I introduced at the beginning is here the question, out of these competing segmentations, which ones do we want to choose? These segmentation candidates form a hierarchy, they are nested, and so this tree here represents these various segments, and we then have some function not shown here that gives us a figure of merit for each one of these segments. So let's say this figure of merit could try and answer questions like, does it look like we have precisely one cell here, or is it possibly more or less than one cell? If it is one cell, do we cover all of the cell, or does it look like we're losing some of the cell, and so on. And so we have a reward associated with each of these boxes here, or circles. And well, we want to, this reward can be positive or negative, so it can be reward or it can be penalty actually. And we want to maximize the sum of rewards, subject to the condition that we cannot get a reward for one thing twice. So it would not be allowed to collect the reward both for this candidate and for that candidate, because the one is a subset of the other. You know, it's either the one or the other. So these rewards, if you like, we could represent them as unary potentials, and I've not shown these unaries here simply because, you know, there is one associated with each one of them, and anyway I don't have the numbers, but I could have drawn a factor here, a unary factor for each and every one of them. Now, what this tree structure is being used for is to say that we cannot earn the reward for both a parent and a child. And so these pairwise factors, shown here as blue boxes, are introduced. And we also introduce two possible states for each variable. We, again, being here Arteta, Lempitsky, Noble, and Sisterman. And these two possible states are 1 or 0, and the understanding here is that I can collect reward only where I have a transition from 1 to 0, and that transitions from 0 to 1 are disallowed. Okay, let me repeat this more slowly. So let's say, for example, that I want to cut like so. I'm not saying that this is optimal now, I'm just using this cut because it matches the numbers that I've written here. So you see that above the cut, I have always selected a state of 1, and below the cut, I have always selected a state of 0. So just to translate this into the kind of image that we had earlier, I could have done like this. I could have said, this is the root node, and this root node has 3 children, and then for each of these children, or for all of them, we have always 2 possible states. 0 and 1. And now we have always these transition costs. And I have the the graph goes on here at the bottom, not shown. And the requirement, or also the result of the message passing, is that in the end, I will select precisely, let's say these states are 0 and 1, 0 and 1, 0 and 1, 0 and 1. At the very end, I will select precisely one state for the root node, which here happens to be state number 1. So this generalization of shortest path would go, I would use the one branch here, I would use the one branch there, and I would use the 0 branch here. And it goes on. So in terms of these ones and zeros, this is how I code if or not I am using a particular segment. And the understanding here is that I collect the reward for a segment precisely if I have a transition from 1 to 0. So this is now shown in this table here. The table is for such a factor psi, and the reward or penalty depends on the parent, which kind of states of 0 and 1, and the child, which kind of states 0 and 1. Now, if the parent state is 0 and the child state is 0, the cost is 0. There is neither a reward nor penalty. If the parent state is 1 and the child state is 1, the cost is 0. There is neither reward nor penalty. If, on the other hand, the parent has a state of 1 and the child has a cost of 0, then I reap the reward, a negative cost. But vice versa, if the parent has a state of 0 and the child a state of 1, this is what I want to disallow. So I give it a cost of plus infinity. All right. And these kind of, so this is now what's happening in all these blue boxes. And the only thing that differs from one blue box to the next is that, well, the reward always depends on the particular child. This is informed by the content of the image and by what, let's say, the classifier that tried to say, is this a good match for a single cell or not, what this classifier gave me. So this is how it can be cast as a problem. And now the zeros and ones here, this is the end result that I get out when I do dynamic programming, when I do message passing on this tree structured graph. And what I get out in the end is a selection of some of these candidates. And if you want to read more about it, have a look at this nice paper. That was my example number 1. Example number 2, I will gloss over because in terms of coding, the problem is very similar to the problem above. These images below from an older paper, 2013, were the ones I showed in the introduction. The images above are from a more recent paper. I just have to say, out of pride, it's a paper by Björn Andres and Björn Menze. They're both former PhD students and are now both professors in Dresden and Munich, respectively. And they developed an exact solver for the problem, but found that the tree-based heuristic proposed in this 2013 paper from the Kremers lab actually worked very well. I'm showing it here because they tried this out on a variety of problems. For example, on the retina image, where again a tree-shaped prior was used with the information that the root node is being here. And then you see the result if you just do a pixel-wise decision or if you use the tree prior, and results are better. Or this was, I think, a image from a neuron. You can again say, let's put a root here. And if you do pixel-wise segmentation, well, if you use the tree-shaped prior, you get a more accurate result. I think this was done, the computation I think was in 3D. And another problem here from angiography, I believe. Again, the tree-shaped prior, you say my root is here, and then the result without or with a tree prior. So it's a very versatile way of modeling, I believe. And the final example, I've shown you the slide before, or from Scissorman, and here from a very nice short course, I want to give you a few more examples. So this is for recognizing facial features, in particular the left and right eye and left and right corner of mouth. Now, nobody, would use, I mean, the results that you get nowadays for facial recognition are way superior than the results that you got then. But what's important is the essence about, this modeling of the constellation of parts, and that has not changed. So the model here is, what's shown here is the, you cannot read this, but it tries to say relative location. So the relative location for the, from our point of view, top left eye is very precise. This is here. Then we have a unary factor telling us where is the other eye located. And you see, how hard or soft this factor is spatially in terms of this green ellipse. Then there is a factor telling you where, from our point of view, the left corner of the mouth is located, and where, from our point of view, the right corner of the mouth is located. And you see that here we have some, because some faces are wider than others, or because the camera might be closer or further from the face, there is some uncertainty in where the one eye is relative to the other. And there's some uncertainty because some faces are longer and some pictures are taken from closer and farther. There's some uncertainty where the one corner of the mouth is. And then here, these uncertainties, if you want, they amplify each other. And this is why we have an even bigger uncertainty for that corner of the mouth. All right, so here, I hope you recognize the tree. So the tree that we have here is this one. Note that it's different from the tree shown in this slide above, where a nose is used. Anyway, so this is the tree being used here. And what we need two ingredients now. We need, so I note that I dashed this part. So I'm going to run this algorithm for every possible position of this eye. So I'm going to fix this node at one out of several possible locations. And then I need a unary that tells me how probable is at that particular image patch to see an eye, or a corner of a mouth, or other corner of a mouth. Those are the unary terms. And then I have these pairwise terms that tell me if the relative distance or the relative location looks okay or not. So in this model, we have these 4 parts, and you can see for this particular image here where these part detectors gave you, or what response they gave you. So at the time, this was done simply by cross-correlating, by moving this patch across the image and recording the match. And you see here in the false color map if the match is high or low. Also highlighted are the local maxima. And now you can say, all right, let's keep only the local maxima. I'm going to simplify the argument a little bit now. Yeah? In reality, it was done in a more sophisticated manner. But to simplify things a little bit, let's say that we find these are maybe 100 hits for the first eye. So then these are 100 discrete states for this eye. Each of these discrete states has a merit as expressed by the Uri factor. Then we have maybe 120 hits for that eye, each with a respective merit, which is shown here by the color coding, and so on. And what we need to evaluate now, well, in this tree is the overall most likely solution. And the overall most likely solution, hooray, is this one. The 2 eyes and the 2 corners of the mouth have been found, even though, and this is the nice thing, even though the individual detectors were not perfect. So in fact, this eye here, the strongest maximum was here at the correct spot. But the other eye, it had a pretty strong maximum at the correct location, but it had an even stronger maximum, for whatever reason, at the wrong location. And similarly for the corners of mouth, so we have the good locations, but we also have very misleading strong detections. Yeah? And we have the good location, but also misleading strong detections. And here taking them into account jointly then gives us the correct solution. Now this was for a very simple tree, yeah, one with only 4 nodes. It so happens that if you look at most animals, most animals have a skeleton, right? And the skeleton, luckily, to a decent approximation is a tree. And so a lot of work in post-estimation has used trees to approximate humans or mammals or whatever was under study. So the same kind of technology that I've just shown you has been used very successfully in post-estimation. All right, and in closing, I want to show you this. This image is one everybody knows. It's called a pictorial structure. It's from this paper and Fischler and Elschlager. I'm not sure, this is a paper from 1973. I'm not sure they ever learned, how famous their paper became afterwards, because generations of computer vision scientists have, taken inspiration from this. And well, the model is the same. We have unary factors. How much does this look like hair, this pixel or not? Then they don't call this ear, but they call this edge for reasons you will see. This has a unary factor. That has a unary factor, and so on. And then we have these pairwise factors that are here also shown as springs. Now you notice that this is not a tree, right? This is a graph with loops. And they understood this. So in 1973, they wrote this paper and said that, well, if our graph was a chain, then dynamic programming would be exact. They didn't know about dynamic programming on trees at the time. This was only found, I think, by Pearl in 1988. But they understood that if the graph was a chain, their inference would be exact. But it being not a chain, but a more complicated graph, they used a kind of greedy generalization of shortest path to come up with an approximate algorithm that worked nicely. And I'm showing you this for two reasons. Because to argue that the algorithmics they had pretty much figured out at the time, and this was the very same thing that was used 30 years later. And I also want to show you this. So in 1973, which is broadly how old I am, I'm a bit younger, 2 years younger, this is how an image was represented. So those were the limitations of computers and printers at the time. So an image was shown by typing different characters on top of each other, and the higher the density, well, the darker the pixel. So if I understand correctly, then this was 35 by 30 or something, or by 25 representation. No. A face image had this many pixels at the time, 35 by 20 something pixels. That was a good picture, what you see here. On the right hand side, they deteriorated the picture by adding noise. And then proceeding in the order to first find hair, then find left ear, then find right ear, and so on. And now you see why they talk about edge and not ear. They were proceeding in this order, and then they ask about where is so where do they find the nose? And actually they find a good spot for the nose, and then they give you the precise coordinates for the nose, which actually does the right thing. Even then, you would for a paper pick the figures where it worked, or the examples where it worked. Yeah, and it did work. So we have today again used dynamic programming, an idea from shortly, probably invented in World War II, but anyway, published shortly after World War II. Last time we applied it only to open chains, and today we have applied it to trees, a generalization of this. We've used today dynamic programming on trees, and many kinds of trees, so stars or skeletons of humans, etc., have been used and are still being used in computer vision. And it's one in our collection of few problems that are exactly solvable efficiently. And we will continue this journey around our table here, always with applications in computer vision, in the weeks to come. Have a good weekend, have a good week, and see you soon. Bye-bye.